welcome YouTube. We got a good one for you here today. We're here to talk about Lake Hemet and the top 5 fishing spots. This is a long video, so go get yourself a drink and something to eat before you start watching and settle in because we got some great information for you here, completely free here on YouTube. First, we're going to talk about the lake overview because it's a good idea to understand the ins and outs of the lake and how things work here. We'll begin by talking about where it costs money and where it doesn't, or almost doesn't. And I'll explain more on that later. So, where does it cost money? Well, there is a private side of the lake, which takes up a very large portion of the lake. So, basically, actually, we'll start out over here on this side of the lake just to show you the dividing line between the pay side and the free side. So right here, you can see this fence right there in the background that runs along the shoreline, and it goes all the way down to the lake. And what is that fence for? Well, this is the pay side is over here on this side, and on the west side of that fence is the free side. So from that fence line right here, all this shoreline is all pay. It's all considered campground slash day use here at Lake Hemet. So you might wonder, well, how do I pay? Where do I pay to get into this lake? And here's the answer to that. So right here off the main highway, you have the Lake Hemet um, campground and day use entrance. So you'll drive in, and right here they got a. We'll use this to show you guys what it looks like. But after you drive in, there's the highway out there in the distance. You'll drive in, and you'll come along and see this little gate here. This is where you'll pay $25 to get into the lake. Now they don't charge to fish; they just charge $25 to get into the lake. So it's a little pricey to get into the lake. However, you have to look at it. It's by the carload, so you can bring your entire family in here and fish the lake for $25. It's not 25 a person, it's 25 a car. So it's very similar to Silverwood Lake, where they charge $10 to get in, and then it's a free for all from there. So you'll have to pay to get into some of these spots I'm going to mention. So just a heads up there. This lake is very drought affected. Right now, the water is really low, and the lake looks a lot like you see it in this satellite shot. And the east side, real shallow, and some decent depths here on the west side. And we'll talk more about all of that later on. But yeah, it's a shallow lake, guys, and it's affected by warm temperatures and lack of rain a lot faster than some other lakes. This is very similar to Big Bear Lake in the way that it is kind of like the way the bottom is and the depths and just how the lake is affected. It's like a miniature Big Bear Lake. So that is the overview. So we have the private side and the public side. So with that, let's get into it, guys. Let's get into this top 5 spots. We're going to start out with number 5. So first up, we are going to talk about the point. The point is right there. It looks like a point to me, and this is the actual stocking point for the lake. So every time the lake gets planted, this is where they go in, and the way to access this is through the pay side of the lake. You must pay to get here. You got to come in. You'll go through the gate. You make a right, and it's the first left. If you get confused after watching this video, just ask at the front gate, how do I get to the point? And they'll tell you where to go. They even have little maps that they hand out, and that'll help you. So what makes this is such a great spot? Why would it make the top 5? Well, as you know, as I just said, that this is where they stock the lake. So knowing that, I mean, you're already at a huge advantage for the fish to be in proximity to this location. Now, this is only stocked, this lake is only stocked in the basically the late winter, early summer, sometimes in the fall, but basically the cooler months here. They do not stock it in the summertime, and there's good reason for that. This is a very, very shallow side of the lake, and man, if they planted trout here in the summer, they would die really fast. So this is why they plant in those colder months. But what happens is after they plant this spot, a lot of the fish tend to hang out in here, especially in the colder months. There's really no reason for them to move on. They got a food source in these flats, shallow water, maybe 3 to 5 feet of water here. And man, I mean, it's just a perfect habitat for winter for a trout. And so they tend to stick around. So it's a good spot to start out. If you hear that hey, we just planted a lake, this is a great spot to start out. Now, of course, there's 4 other spots that we'll talk about in this video, but this is why I really like it. Not to mention, you can drive right up to this spot and park. Now, look at right here. You could see you could fish right out of the back of your car or your truck. And that makes this for a great, great experience out here at Lake Hemet. So, and look at the different angles because of the shape of this thing. You can cast out from different directions, and there's plenty of room to get your tackle into the water here and not really deal with other anglers. There's just plenty of room. I've seen as many as 20 or 30 people out here, and there was still plenty of room for everybody to fish it. So that's why it makes my top 5. So go ahead and check this spot out. It's one of the more productive spots, and you'll definitely see videos fishing this area on my channel in the future. So let's get on to spot number 4. All right, moving on to number 2 is the campground. You can fish right out of your campsites here, and that alone makes it just a great place to fish. Um, but you don't need to be camping here to fish here. Now, you can drive right up, just like the other areas. You could drive right up to the shore here and fish it. So there have these little entrance points all through here. I've yet to see somebody drive into the lake, but I imagine that it's completely possible and has probably been done. But how do you get to this? Well, it is also part of the pay side of the lake. You can enter right here. You can take the road. Once you've entered, you just come in and make a right, and just stay along that road. And this road will follow the same road that goes on the public side, but it'll be on the other side of the fence, and then eventually you'll end up down here where you'll see some different access points, but basically the campground side. Now, why would this make the top 5? Well, as you saw in the number 5 spot, well, they plant the lake right here, and typically those fish will begin to move out and end up along these shorelines. These are usually the first fishing spots that will show some good action after that plant. So maybe sometimes it's the day of. It really depends on what's going on up here and what's happening at the lake at the time, weather, water temperature, wind direction, all kinds of stuff play a factor in when they'll end up here. But this area is usually pretty productive after a plant. And you'll just have to check out the Patreon if you're interested in details when these plants happen and when these fish will show up there. But I really like this area, like I said, because you can drive up, and it is usually reliable after a plant. And because you could park right there on the shore, it just makes it an incredible spot to fish. I mean, you could have your food, your chairs, and a lot of people choose to pump their radios out here. And there's plenty of spread out room, and there's some great spots along here too. So that's why it makes the top 5 for me, because just because of the access and the fact that the action can be really good here after a plant, and usually the same day. Like I said, the planting point being here, usually within that same day or the day after. Fishing is quite good along this area, and there's just so much room down here. Now there can be crowds. Don't get me wrong. This shoreline is big as it is, and the fact that you could park everywhere. I've seen at times there are some pretty good sized crowds out here, but typically there's always room to get around. So again, very shallow in this area. So as the water warms up, there will definitely not be trout in this area. This is just not a good habitat for the warmer year times of the year. But in the winter, early spring, it's quite good in this area, and that's why it makes my top five. All right, moving on to spot number three. So here along the same shoreline as the campgrounds, you move down further. There's a small section of shore that I'd like to talk about for our spot number three. Is right here. It's right next to this fence that divides the public and private sections of shoreline. Now, you might ask, why would you fish right here and pay $25 when you could fish right here, literally across the fence, and you don't pay anything? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because when you pay to get in here, that leaves you with one, two, and three spots to try. Versus down here, you're very limited. There's only a little bit more of a shoreline. So, really, what it is you're closer to the stocking point, and you get a lot of options. And let's face it, I mean, even after you pay your $25, you still have the option to go fish the public side, right? So, why do I like this spot down here? Well, uh, underwater, there's a decent drop off that begins in this area, and in the warmer months when they're still planting, so usually in the spring, this is where you would want to focus. Is this shoreline right here? It tends to be one of the better spots, and that's just because of the water's a little deeper. The water stays a little cooler longer, and it's just a great spot. Now, you got to be careful here because you can get hung up in this fence. The fence, they were pretty smart. At some point, they put this fence in, and the fence actually goes pretty far out into the water. And I think that was just to be ready for when the water dropped and all that. So you got to be careful you're casting, or you're going to lose all your gear casting into that fence as it's underwater. But this whole shoreline is usually pretty good. And like I said, I mean, there's campsites right above this spot. So it's just another great place to fish and access the lake, and tends to be really productive all spring, and even in the winter, it's pretty good down here. And like I said, you still have those other areas when you have paid to get into this section. It does leave you with the option of fishing other spots. So that's why it makes my number three spot. And let's move on to number two and number one. And we'll talk about some other options even on the back side of this video. All right, let's get on to it. Number two. So moving on to number two is right on the other side of the fence from the pay spot. Why would I say this spot? I mean, why not just pay and fish here? Well, because the water actually does get deeper, even on the other side of this fence. There is a drop off that is slightly better. And guess what? This spot does not cost anything to fish. However, you do need a forest adventure pass. That is the catch that I was talking about earlier in this video, is that you need a forest adventure pass to fish this spot. Now, how much does that cost? It's about $5. It's about $5 right now. Now, that price might change because this video will be posted, and who knows, what'll happen in the future. But right now, it's about $5. for Forest Adventure Pass. The good news is you could buy an annual pass. You could do other things that same day with this pass if you do buy just a day pass. So it isn't good just here. It's not like you buy this Forest Adventure Pass and this is the only place it's good. It just means that you can use it here. It's an option. So it does require that. They do have bathrooms, and the bathrooms are pretty nice. They do a pretty good job. It's mostly pretty clean. The downside to this spot is you cannot drive down to the lake. You have a little bit of a walk here, and I know, terrible walking outdoors. But you got to park up here and then you can walk down to the shoreline. Now, the water levels will vary every year. It's going to be a little different. But as you can see, the water level can come all the way up here, quite high up here, and leave it. But if you'll notice, it does look like it drops off. And this shoreline is a little more subtle than it looks. It's not like a cliff right here. It's actually quite flat and a really enjoyable place for the kids to run around and get some fish. Now, about the fish habitat, it's really a good spot because this is the transition zone between the shallows off to the east side of the lake and the deeper side of the west side. So trout will tend to hang out here after they've made their journey from the stocking point down here off of the point. They can end up down here, and this area tends to hold quite a few fish. And I've done very well. In fact, it's one of my favorite places to fish on the entire lake, and that's why, because it's usually very consistent. I don't know every reason why fish gravitate toward this spot, but I do know the habitat is right. They got good depth, and it's just a great spot overall. So that's why it's my number two, and it's just an easy spot to come visit and walk around and park, and they just have a lot going on right here for you. So it makes my number two, and it's probably one of the most productive spots on the lake that isn't over here near the point where the stocking point is. This spot is consistently probably one of the highest catch rates of anywhere on the lake from shore. So great spot, and that's why it makes my number two. All right, my number one spot is actually a combination of spots. And I know if there's two different spots, how could it be one spot? But they're pretty much the same habitat. And what do I mean by that? Well, you have the same drop offs, the same, basically the same situation underwater, and depths and all that is pretty much the same. And even the parking situation is very similar. As you can see, you have two spots. You got one right here and another one here. And let's drop in on this spot here just to show you what this looks like, guys. I mean, look at this picnic area and bathrooms. And right there is a cool feature. They got this trout out here that you can take a picture next to. Just a great spot. And also, hey, the fishing is actually quite good here at times. Again, like all other spots, I mean, it just depends on what's going on at the lake temperatures, stocking, when the fish were stocked. But this spot's great. Now, currently, the water is really low, and this is quite steep in this area and looks just like this right now. It's actually about like this. It might even be a little bit lower, and but there's some great spots. This tree right here happens to be loaded with bees at the time. I was out here like not even a week ago, and it's just full of bees right now. But as you can see, there's some decent drop offs in this area, and the fishing can be pretty good with all this great underwater topography under there. So it's just a great spot to get into different angles and locations for fish. And guess what? It's very productive. There have been a lot of great days. It's some of my favorite spots to fish here at Lake Hemet. And you know what? The only thing is, between the spot right here next to the fence and this point right here and this point, I mean, this spot could be wide open and this one could be dead and this one could be getting fish. And or I've seen it where this one's pretty good and this one's pretty good, but the spot by the fence is dead. So the important part of these locations is to try different spots. You never want to fish in any of the Southern California trout waters and just stay in one spot for 8 hours and be mad that you didn't catch anything. It's super important to move spots. So, but I really like the access here. It's really easy to get down into the fishing area, and water levels can vary, and it makes the shoreline a little uncomfortable when the water is really low. As you can see with these drone shots that I'm adding here, that it can really vary on how it looks along the shoreline. But currently, it's quite low and pretty steep along the shoreline. So be careful with the kids and stuff like that. It's not necessarily like a cliff or anything, but it's pretty steep. So I recommend these spots though. Really great access. Park the car, 100-foot walk, and you're on the water. It's hard to beat that. There's not very many places in Southern California with that kind of access. So that's why it makes the list. Number one, this is my favorite spot on the whole lake. And I believe if you visit the lake, you will enjoy it too. So stay tuned for one more spot as a bonus, and we'll talk about some other things. So, last but not least, as a bonus, there is one more option here at the lake. You can park out here at the end of the road here and take some hiking trails. There are some hiking trails in the area. So here's the parking lot, and as you can see, look who was there. Forest Service was in the house, and these are the guys that check your Forest Adventure Pass. And look right here, there's some hiking trails, so you can take these trails off into this road and make your way all the way out here toward the dam. As you can see, there are goat trails leading down to the lake, and you can fish here. You can fish all the way down here, and these shorelines are very remote and very deep water out here. And this is where all the action is in the summertime. If you want to catch trout, you got to head down there to the depths of the lake. But it's a great alternative toward the crowds. These areas that I mentioned before can be quite busy in the summertime, just full of campers and people enjoying their summer vacations up here at the lake. But that spot right there, particularly, gets very little attention and can be quite nice. And it's just a great break from the crowds to walk out that way and fish. You will likely be by yourself no matter what time of year down there, if not maybe one or two other people in the whole area. So it's a great spot to try. And that's why I'm throwing it in the video. So here's the wrap up to the top five. So to wrap up our top five video of Lake Hemet, I just want to say thank you to all the Patreons out there. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more stuff like this, head on over to Patreon, guys. That's where I do weekly fishing reports directly from this channel of places that I fish and or have great knowledge about. And people are enjoying great success at fishing in many places from here all the way and even into Utah. People are enjoying the information that I give out over there on Patreon. So if you're looking for a little more information or whatever is currently going on at places like Lake Hemet, make sure you check out the link in the description below and join us over on Patreon. We would love to have you guys over there. If not, thank you for subscribing here on YouTube. As you guys can see, the channel has grown quite a bit over the years, and it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger. So If you have a suggestion or a lake that you'd like to see a top five, post up your request in the comment section below. We'll likely do a video on it. We got lots more to come. We got a lot of lakes in Southern California to cover in this same fashion. So hopefully it'll be with us on one of those videos. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Hopefully we'll see you guys on the water. Thanks for watching.